Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Let's get started.
So like, how do you were you always like very confident to do this in public, or did you have like a fear of like public speaking a little bit?
The thing with me is like, I always assume that everybody else is in their own world. Mm-hmm. So I think that the same way how I'm in my own world, I think everybody else is the same way.
Yeah.
So I don't really think people are actually paying attention to me as much as most people would think. Mm. Yeah. Especially when you're doing something like just having a basic interview like this. Like, it's nothing like outlandish or crazy.
Yeah. That makes sense. I was like, okay, cause like this is my first time ever doing like the in-person, like out and about. And I already have a big fear of public speaking, but like, what would be the best thing for you to like, what you would recommend somebody to like get over that kind of fear?
Getting over that fear?
Yeah.
Well, for one, kind of like what I just said earlier, was just like most people, they're kind of lost in their own bubble. They're lost in their own world. They're too busy worrying about things in their own life to actually care that much about what we're doing.
Yeah.
And I would say that maybe if anybody cares, it's probably like a split second of interest that they'll have, which is like, oh, camera, two people talking. But I don't think that curiosity lasts too long until they're bombarded by thoughts of tomorrow, exactly, what's going to happen after in their life.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I don't mind the attention either. Like, I don't really care. Mm-hmm. I'm getting attention for a good reason, I think. Like, I'm not doing anything that's like foolish or nothing.
Exactly.
Like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. So obviously now with a growing YouTube channel, like this is kind of something you'll see more and more often, is like more interviews, more public speaking, and stuff like that. What would be the greatest, like, or what would be a good piece of advice for somebody starting out YouTube and stuff, and like from your own experience?
Oh, as far as getting over like fears
of getting over fears and stuff of like YouTube, starting this.
I definitely, what worked for me was exposure therapy. So what exposure therapy is, like, you expose yourself to something little by little until you build enough of a tolerance to it, to a point where it doesn't faze you anymore. So a lot of people that are worried about like talking on camera and stuff like that, usually one thing I always suggest is start light. Like, don't compare yourself to somebody who's been doing it for a month or like a year, like me. Like, compare yourself. Don't compare yourself to anybody. Just kind of go according to your own pace. Mm-hmm. So if you're super nervous about talking about something that's super thoughtful for you, maybe don't start off with that. Maybe just start off
lighthearted.
Just start off just talking about something like light, something simple. Yeah. Don't make the video as long. Keep it short. Mm-hmm. Another thing would be, if that's too nerve-wracking too for you, I would just make a video and not even think about posting it. Just make it just for the sake of making it, and don't post it at all. Yeah. So over time, you're going to find you're just going to get used to it, just like anything else. I mean, for me, when I first started talking on camera, I was super awkward at first. Too.
Yeah, definitely.
I was stumbling over what I was saying and everything, and then now I just don't care. It's just second nature to me.
Got you.
It's whatever.
Now with YouTube, we're seeing kind of like a growing audience with you. What can we expect in the future now? And what are your goals right now with YouTube and stuff?
Well, with YouTube, my channel's growing pretty quick right now. I'm at just over 7,000 subscribers.
Yeah.
My next closest goal would be to hit 10K, but my long-term goal for this year is to hit 100K.
Yeah.
And I do think that I can get that by the end of the year, as long as I work hard and stay consistent with posting and stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely.
But one thing I'm mainly going towards right now is like self-development content. Yeah. So I do want to make more videos about things I'm passionate about, not just pumping out barbering videos.
Exactly, yeah.
I could make barbering videos a lot because they're easier to make, because I've been doing it for 8 years. Yeah. So the topics are endless to come up with, but I want to move towards like self-development content.
Relaying back to that point now, stuff like self-development, have you read any new books or like what epiphanies have you drawn up now from
epiphanies?
Like where are you at right now with self-development in terms of your own personal life?
So throughout my life, I find that I always have a hard time just trying to find the balance between being present with myself and remaining connected to that spiritual side. I find with me, when I get into new ventures, kind of like YouTube and stuff, I tend to kind of get too deep into it, and then I end up over-identifying with certain stuff. So if I'm doing YouTube, I end up over-identifying with it, and I kind of lose touch with my present self a lot. And lately, I was kind of going through that, where I was having more anxiety day to day, and I find that I was very attached to outcomes. I was very attached to, like, if I'm making a video, I'm very attached to, like, is this video going to get good views? Is this going to do better than my last one? And I find that kind of mentality of being so attached to the outcome, it started to affect my confidence in making videos. It took the fun away from it, because what was fun before in the beginning when I first started YouTube was there was no expectation. It was like, it was a new venture. So it's like nobody's expecting anything to get a lot of views. But once you start getting the views, once you start getting the subscribers, all of a sudden you start putting this pressure on yourself to start outperforming the last video. And I think that mentality itself kind of sabotages you. So I kind of been stepping away from that, and just kind of getting rid of having that expectation and just having fun with it again.
Yeah, exactly. That's good. Now, we talk about ego and stuff and how it kind of plays a part when you are gaining success. What are some things that are you doing personally, or you would recommend to other people to kind of get rid of that ego or that attachment to whatever they're working on to make it fun again, I guess?
I would say practice. Some people do prayer. For me, I like to go on late night walks, meditation, an activity to detach yourself from all of that. If you're constantly revolved around your work, if you're constantly consumed by your work 24/7, that becomes your story of your life. And when you become too identified with that story, it's going to be harder to pull you away from it. So because with me, you guys can see the tour of my place. I'll be posting that video here. You can click the link up there.
Amazing video.
And as you can see, my place is very work-based. Like, I'm surrounded by work constantly. So it's very easy for me to be consumed by that, and for me to only see work all the time.
Yeah.
So for me, that's a very big trap I fall into a lot, where that becomes my whole life. And I need to kind of regularly practice stepping away from that. And how I do that is going by late night walks and just kind of detaching from all of that.
Yeah. I want to kind of touch back again, because obviously now you've kind of given the solution to the ego. What were the problems that you were noticing now, like specifically, that like were affecting your life because of the ego? Like, what feelings were you getting? What kind of emotions were you getting besides anxiety? Was there anything else that was kind of tying?
I find that, for me, I have like a certain standard that in my mind, there's a certain standard that I have for myself in my head of how I should live, how I should be. And every time I fall short of that, I feel like negative emotions coming with that.
Yeah.
So in my head, ideally, I have this kind of image of like who I think I should be. So, the Rosh Man should be this confident guy who constantly pumps out content, confident 24/7, creative 24/7, gets shit done, works out, goes to the gym, does all these things. And anytime I fall short of that image that I have for myself, I end up getting very disappointed.
Yeah.
So, but I didn't realize that itself is being attached to a certain outcome. And, in a lot of spiritual books that I've read, a lot of it says, even the Buddha, most of people's suffering comes from attachments, being attached to things.
Yeah.
So for me, one challenging thing that I had to learn was knowing the difference between being unattached and being completely dismissive about something. Because people always say, like, I used to think when someone's like, don't be attached to the outcome, I associated not being attached to the outcome to not giving a shit about something at all. And like, I was looking at it from a very extreme way. I'd either be super obsessed with something where I get all my self-worth from it, or I completely don't give a shit about it and I just ignore it. So I thought that there was only two ways it could be. I didn't realize that you can pursue something yet still be not attached to the outcome of that thing.
That makes sense.
So just finding that balance for me.
Yeah, definitely.
Because I would flip-flop back and forth to the extremes.
Right.
And a good example I would say to this, like if you guys are looking for an example of like what I mean by pursuing something without being attached to an outcome, I'll give you a good example, something most guys can relate to. I thought about this last night. Like, imagine you're going on a date with a girl. I'm going to say this from my experience. I've been on dates with girls before in the past where before going on the date, I'm super attached to the outcome of how it's going to turn out. And when I'm super attached to how it's going to turn out, what ends up happening is I start overthinking the whole thing. I start overthinking what I'm going to say. I start overthinking about the way I'm talking to her, the way I'm acting, because that's your way of trying to control the situation because you really, really want the outcome to go a certain way. Now, I've also been on dates with girls where I'm not attached to the outcome, but that doesn't mean that I don't give a shit about going on that date. I still give a shit, but I'm not like if it goes good, I hope it goes good. But if it doesn't go good, it's not going to ruin my day either.
Yeah.
That mentality itself, it's way more enjoyable to go on that date because now you're speaking honestly, you're being present, you're just in the moment, you're just enjoying your time. You're not consumed by anxious thoughts of like, what do I say? What do I do? So that would be a good example of that. And in the past, like I said, most of my life I've been an extremist. And what I mean by that is,
Not a terrorist.
what I mean by that is I jump to extremes. I either go all in or all out. So in the past, that's how I looked at dating. It's like either I go all in and I'm like, super obsessed with the outcome and I get super nervous, or I don't give a shit at all and I don't go on the date at all. But, with time, I've realized you can go for things in life, but not be super attached to the outcome. And same thing with my YouTube videos, same thing with this interview, is I'm doing it. There's purpose behind it, but if it doesn't get views, if I look stupid, that's okay too.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, that's a really good example they used when you're attached to something. That's a really, really good real world example. And you kind of noticed that attachment onto your work now with YouTube. How are you, like, you say you're going on runs and stuff like that. Has there been anything else that you've been kind of using as tools to help you practice that, like, elimination of attachment?
I would say educating myself more on this topic has helped because I would say the main hindrance for me at that time was not understanding the ego, not understanding these things fully. And I think just having more awareness on the topic itself has helped me kind of navigate it more.
Definitely.
Now it's just a matter of practice, putting it into practice, because for me, I had to learn this the hard way. And I think a lot of people have a hard time understanding this, is realizing something and actually changing is two different things. And you see this, a common mistake in therapy. I know a lot of people who've been going to therapy for years. Like I know people who've been seeing a therapist for like 15, 20 years, but yet they still have all the same problems because they get the realization aspect of it confused with the actual cure. When you realize something about yourself, like when you go to therapy or like you come to like a philosophical realization in your life, it makes you feel good. You have like a rush of dopamine in your brain. You feel like, oh shit, everything just clicked. Everything makes sense. And that's, people usually stop after that realization. They don't implement actual practices to change themselves. And that's what would happen with me a lot throughout my life. I would come to a realization about a problem I've been having in my life, and I would confuse the realization with the cure for the problem. I would think that just because I'm aware of it now, that all of a sudden the problem's gone. But I've noticed throughout my life, the same problems keep coming back, and they keep coming back. And a big reason for that was because I wouldn't actually put this stuff in practice. I wouldn't actually put in consistent effort to change. I thought just being aware was enough. But that's kind of what I've learned.
Wow. Yeah. And I think that's a problem that affects a majority of people, is coming to that epiphany, but not putting the work in. Why do you think that is? Do you think it's a thing of like anxiety inducing? Like, what do you think? Why do you think people do that?
Like people, well, for one,
or like in general.
Well, for one, changing is hard. Like to actually change yourself, it requires constant effort to do it. So that's one thing. But two, I would say most people aren't even actually aware of their problems to begin with. So most people don't even have step one on lock. But for me, from my personal experience, I would say the reason I didn't change was because, like I was saying, I confused me knowing something. Like I guess how I would say this. I guess I identified with my my intellect. So I thought just because I know something that I am that thing. So just because I know that I'm toxic in this area, that all of a sudden I'm not toxic in this area anymore because I'm aware of it now. But we humans, we're not always consciously aware of what we're doing. Like, you can't 24/7 always be consciously aware of the way you're acting, what you're saying, all that. There's no fun in life to live like that. Most of the time, we're just reacting. Most of the time, we're just going off of our subconscious. Most of the time, we're going off of our instincts. And in those moments, we're going off of our programming, how we've been programmed through life. So having a realization is cool, but if you don't implement that and you don't rewire yourself, you're constantly going to act out that same programming you've had throughout your life. And to reprogram yourself, it takes effort. It takes time. It's like the equivalent of you seeing somebody, starting out super overweight and then losing weight in the gym over time. It takes time. So same thing with your mind. It's like a muscle. You have to work it out consistently.
That's, very true. Now with that ego, are you noticing it in your art now too? With that issues that you're having? Did you see that translating into your art or
I see it translating into everything in life. I feel like my ego specifically, I can't speak for all people's egos. And there's different definitions of how you define ego, but my ego, when I'm too identified with the ego, I stop learning. Like I stop learning. I think I know everything. So yeah, it affects everything. I pretty much stop growing.
Like a complete halt on everything basically.
Exactly. Because in the art, to learn, you have to admit that you don't know something. You have to be honest with yourself and everything in life. When I'm identified more with my ego, I don't even want to admit that I'm afraid of anything. I don't even want to be honest with myself of my own limitations. Yeah. And when you don't know your own limitations, like, how are you going to grow? There's this chapter in the book, The Way of the Superior Man, where he talks about knowing your real edge and don't fake it. Exactly. And what he means by that is every man has a certain edge. Every person has an edge. And your edge is basically your limits. And if you're not self-aware enough, what ends up happening is you'll either overextend yourself too much to the point where you'll either embarrass yourself or hurt yourself, or you might shy away too much into the comfort zone and not grow. Yeah. So as a man, you have to consistently be honest with yourself about what you fear. So that way you have a good understanding of where your edge is. And then from that edge, you can just take a little bit of a lean forward, not too much. And this is where self-awareness comes into play, because the more self-aware you are, the more you know how much you can lean, how much you can't lean. When you're not aware, when you're too egotistical, what ends up happening is you end up overextending yourself too much. You overestimate yourself. Or you underestimate yourself. So that's how ego has played in my life. I mean, I could go on all day with ego and how it affects my life. There's so many different aspects of it.
Is there, I guess, for somebody that is trying to become more self-aware, I mean, for me too, personally speaking, I don't have is there a moment where it's a instant, a crash, or is it a gradual progression where people, you're oh, my life is da 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 da. Would you say it's more of a big crash for you personally, where you something really bad just happened and then you look back on it and you're oh, because of my ego? Or was it a gradual decline because I guess for the average person who may not know too much about this thing.
Well, for the average person, they typically do have to wait for a big crash to happen for them to finally wake up. That's just how we're wired. Yeah. For me, it was a gradual progression. I typically like to be prepared. I'm a bit more proactive, so I don't like to wait for a big crash to happen for me to all of a sudden wake up. But typically, for a lot of people, they get into life will humble them in a very extreme way for them to finally snap out of their ego and finally realize, or some people never do. And some people might have a big crash, but that puts them deeper into the ego. And they'll never wake up. But as far as becoming self-aware, I say this to everybody. It's happened to me too. If you're someone who doesn't have much self-awareness, in the beginning, expect a period of extreme self-consciousness. When you open that door to self-awareness, what's going to end up happening is in the beginning, you're going to end up finding stuff out about yourself that you didn't know. And you're going to feel very self-conscious in the beginning. It's normal. You're going to realize holy fuck, I have this many things wrong with me. So there's going to be a period where you're going to be feeling very insecure. But that's normal. Because depending on how unconscious you were about these things, it could be a big slap to the face when you all of a sudden realize this stuff. And for some people, it can be as extreme as them, finding these things out and committing suicide, which is very extreme. For me, I just felt very insecure. I started to think well, what the hell else is wrong with me? Exactly. I found out this much. Meanwhile, I thought it was perfect. now I found out all this stuff about myself. Like, it makes you keep digging more and more. Like, what else? What else?
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
So that's very normal. But after a while, you're going to become comfortable with that, and you're going to realize that you're a never-ending work of art. Like, you're always in progress. You're always improving. So being more comfortable with that state will take away the insecurity. Just knowing that you'll never reach a state where you're just perfect all of a sudden.
Right.
My whole life was basically a series of me trying to reach that state where like I'm perfect and I don't have to improve anymore. But even though like I reached that state, I realized it's just temporary, you know? Like you can't stay in there forever.
Exactly. There's always progression to be made and stuff.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much again for sitting down and talking about ego and the problems with it. And thank you for giving those real world examples as well. I think this will help kind of a lot of people maybe going through some kind of issues with their life involving egos.
Yeah.
A big issue, you know.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, dude.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.